record was there were two animals. There was the donkey and its colt. And here, I mean, in kind of a hyper-literal fulfillment of Zechariah 9, you've actually got the donkey and the colt. You say, yeah, but that's not hyper-literal. You find that hyper-literalism throughout rabbinic interpretation, where they'll take a parallel which they understand to be parallel and interpret it in a hyper-literal way. And this is one of those things, like, what do you know? And then there's this idea that Jesus was straddling the two animals as he rode in. They brought the donkey and the colt, placed their cloaks on them, and Jesus sat on them, that he was somehow straddling these two animals, some kind of cowboy Messiah here, rodeo showman or something. How about a common sense reading? They brought the donkey and the colt, placed their cloaks on them, and Jesus sat on them, namely on the cloaks on the animal he was riding. But this is the type of stuff you have to deal with. I apologize for even refuting it, but because it's out there, we take a few minutes to do it. Again, this is a sampling of what we treat over 300 pages of material in Volume 4. Almost all disputed texts, alleged misquotations. I dealt with some of the primary ones here, and earlier in the week, we go through all of them and show the soundness, the rightness of the interpretation, and the Jewishness of the interpretation. The issue that nobody really knew about Jesus and the Roman historians and all that, we refute that. He's well attested from the ancient world, and in keeping with Roman history writing, he's referenced properly, etc. We have no question about his existence. We have no question about the reliability of his witnesses. We have no question about the accuracy of the story. For those with ears to hear and eyes to see, we can rest confidently in the messianic witness that's been given to us. We're going to begin to dive into the subject of Judaism and the oral law. There are other issues that we could have covered in the questions about some major New Testament issues, but just for lack of time, we're not getting into them here, but we treat all of them in depth in Volume 4 of the study guide. Issues, for example, of the genealogies. For example, the allegation that since the genealogies of Jesus in the New Testament say that he's a descendant of Jeconiah who was cursed, none of his offspring would sit on the throne, therefore he can't be the Messiah. Some Messianic Jews argue, no, that's a proof of the virgin birth because he couldn't have been born through the normal line. I don't use that argument because there's clear evidence at the end of Jeremiah 52 and in Haggai, the second chapter, is confirmed by rabbinic interpretation that the curse was actually reversed. We get into that in objection 5.12 in Volume 4. It's alleged on many anti-missionary websites and teachings that Jesus could not be the Messiah because the Messiah had to be a descendant of Solomon, and yet according to Luke's genealogy, Jesus was not a descendant of Solomon, but rather came through Nathan. How do we answer that? Again, that's very simply resolved, and I deal with it in the genealogical discussion in Volume 2. The promises to David were unconditional, that God would have someone sitting on the throne of David no matter what. Yes, there could be discipline and chastisement, but the promises from David would not be taken away. That promise is then renewed to Solomon, who then forfeits it, clearly because of disobedience. God gives him a promise now, it will continue through you if this, if this, if this. Solomon does the opposite. And that's why you never find references to the throne of Solomon or the son of Solomon in the messianic way. You only find reference to the throne of David and the son of David. So it's absolutely bogus. And in fact, most rabbinic legal discussion does not specify that Messiah had to be a descendant of Solomon, but rather a descendant of David. So those types of arguments easily dismissed. The notion that the virgin birth, the whole concept of it is a pagan borrowing. As I said the other day, just read the alleged accounts of gods having sexual relationships. I shouldn't say alleged accounts, actual accounts of gods having sexual relationships with women, and then see how ridiculously far that is from the biblical virgin birth account. Professors Davies and Allison, whom I mentioned earlier in the week as some of the top Matthew scholars in the world, They said conception without a male element in some form, parthenogenesis in the strict sense, does not seem to be attested. None of the proposed parallels, either pagan or Jewish, seemingly accounts for the story we find in the New Testament. You've got no parallels, really, to what's written in the gospel accounts. And then Craig Keener, a dear friend and one of the top New Testament scholars in the world, thoroughly versed in early Jewish literature and in classical literature of the day. He writes in his Matthew commentary, most alleged parallels to the virgin birth are hopelessly distant, at best representing supernatural births of some kind. Even further are ancient biological views. Certainly, pagan stories of divine impregnation, which typically involve seduction or rape, bear no resemblance to a virgin birth. Again, these things are easily dealt with. And interestingly, the virgin birth is not the type of thing you want to invent, not the kind of story that you decide to circulate. Your 18-year-old daughter comes home to announce that she's pregnant, but she's a virgin. Right, sure. The leader of your group does not actually have a mother, is born of a virgin. You know, there are all kinds of cults and false religions out there. They would sometimes claim that their leader was God. They would sometimes claim that their leader was going to rise from the dead, and of course it didn't happen and destroyed their movement. But I'm not aware of claims that the founder was born of a virgin. It's just one of these things that you don't invent, and which is a story that actually brings potential reproach with it. Hence the later Jewish traditions that Jesus was born illegitimately. That's why they came up with the story of a virgin birth. The reason it's recorded is because it's what happened. And the reason it's what happened is because it's the only way that God could join with man and bring redemption to the world. There's even an argument that Paul and other authors of the New Testament didn't know anything about the virgin birth. And in fact, it was concocted to appeal to pagans or something like that. I mean, you read these objections, you think, okay, is this seriously meant? It's actually taken seriously. So Mark allegedly didn't know about the virgin birth. He just calls Jesus the Son of God. And John allegedly didn't know about the virgin birth. He just tells us that the Word became flesh. That this is not how you describe a normal birth, that the divine Word became flesh. And Paul allegedly didn't know about the virgin birth, and yet he writes in 1 Timothy 3:16, or 1 Timothy 3:16 about the mystery of the faith, the mystery of godliness, that he appeared in a human body. That's not how you describe a normal birth. Declared to be the Son of God with power, according to Paul. Of course they knew it. Of course they understood it. So these objections really are very minor, and we cover them all in depth in Volume 4 for those that want to dig a little deeper. But we need to spend some time discussing the issue of an oral law, an oral tradition, because this is a very major one. And this is the theory, the understanding. The way God gave the Torah to Israel, to the Jewish people, as written, it is unintelligible without further explanation. Don't do any manner of work on the Sabbath. What does work mean? I'll give you a contemporary example. You're an accountant. On Saturday, you like to mow your lawn. Take a break from your accounting work. Are you working by mowing the lawn? What if you're a landscaper, and on Saturday you like to catch up on your books and do your accounting? Are you working by doing accounting